Culture needs a stage. It needs to be lived out. The biggest problems that people have as entrepreneurs are related to their personality.
Care about what you said, Dave, right? Did my team get paid? If my team didn't get paid, then I need to figure it out and probably fire my head of HR.
Low virtue people are imprudent, and high virtue people have prudence. Prudence is the mastery of decision making, and there are 3 steps to this.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcasts. We have an amazing guest, Dave Durand, on with us. He turned a failing company into a 9-figure empire. He's coached over 150,000 people from Fortune 500 CEOs to stay-at-home parents and built one of North America's fastest growing media companies in print, which is utterly insane if you think about it, especially when he got started back in 2007 with it. Executive chairman of Best Version Media, founder and CEO of Leading Giants, and a sought-after authority in leadership, humility, and frankly, influence mastery. Dave didn't study leadership, he lived it, scaling from modest beginnings to billion-dollar enterprises. We dig into culture, hiring, sales, and of course, this great quote that I won't get out of my head, but TT in the AM, talk to your team in the morning, and you can literally be out of the office by 10 a.m. and still run these incredibly successful businesses. This is an awesome episode with a giant in his field. Let's go. Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. I am here with the fantastic Dave Durand, who is a monster coach in so many different ways, a dragon slayer, I think you might say, or more than that. But the really cool thing about Dave is not only a coach. There's a lot of people who like to talk about how to be great at business or at life. I think a lot of them, however, don't have actual real world experience. So Dave, unlike many others, has not only written a bunch of books, I believe 3 books on a lot of different topics. We'll dig into those. But also he's taken his own company from about $500K in sales to hundreds of millions of dollars in sales over a pretty short period of time. So thinking through as an entrepreneur, what that means for success is one of the key areas we want to dig into. But Dave, you just have an amazing background overall. It is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be with you, Adam.
So Dave, drop us in really quick. Well, actually, before we kick it off, I like to try to ask this early on. Otherwise, we'll totally get sidetracked. So first question that I ask everybody, or attempt to ask everybody at least, is how do you define entrepreneurial excellence? Like, what does that even mean to you?
Well, I define it a little bit like leadership. A lot of people say, what is a leader? And they answer questions kind of funny. They say, well, not a hypocrite or a servant leader, leads by example. They say these things. Those are good answers, by the way. I don't dispute them. But the best answer to who is a leader is it's a person who takes you where you want and need to go. That at the end of the day, if you've got a person who's not a hypocrite, who's nice, who's a servant leader, but they're a pilot and you're supposed to go to Detroit and they fly to LA, that's nice, but not good leadership. So that's leadership. It's the same as with entrepreneurship. So when you set out to have a mission, the mission needs to include 2 different things. It needs to grow the product, but it also needs to improve all of the processes while that's happening. Now, very important in that process are the people. Managers manage things and projects. People and leaders manage other people and leaders. And so therefore, giants build giants and personalities lead personalities. So it's got to be somebody that has that kind of like holistic look at it. They're not just product or service focused. They're not just like, falsely pious and virtue signaling that I'm so great to my people, but they combine both those things together because they're both necessary for both parties. We don't have a great product and a great service. You can't be great to the people. And if you're great to the people without a great product or service, that's impossible. It goes away.
So it sounds like to be a great entrepreneur, you have to have a lot of skills tied together in one. What do you think makes it so unique to be a truly successful entrepreneur? Like, what are the key elements? So it's like, you're great. So if I hear you correctly, you're great at product, you're great at probably sales, you're great at leadership. Ours is all of those things combined. And then how do you become great at those things as an entrepreneur? It's tough to be great at any one thing, let alone multiple things.
Yeah. I respect your question because I know you know the answers because you have to live it out yourself. But my take on this, which I think it's hard to dispute. And the reason I say that isn't because I'm right. It's because pretty much anybody who's been successful in entrepreneurship would agree with this. While there are basically a few different types of entrepreneurs, there are financial entrepreneurs, meaning they have so much money and so much power. And they're like people like Bernie Madoff or Epstein, who are just like, there's so much money involved in that they could get certain people to follow them, but they were just losers. Okay. But money gets weak people to follow you, okay, because they can't discern. Then there's also like cult followership, and that is usually tied to a technology. So, for example, Steve Jobs, who was notoriously known to be not a very good leader. I mean, he was fired from his own company. He had a technology behind him that was fascinating, and that technology turned him into kind of this iconic figure that people would follow and put up with because of his fame and because of the product. But those are very, very, very rare. Most people have to lead through what would be considered leader-centric positioning, meaning that they have to have virtue. So at the end of the day, when somebody says, I couldn't get financing as an entrepreneur, or my marketing is off, or we couldn't get product, whatever. Yeah, all of these crazy things. Many of them happen to be like as real can be. Like nobody, no matter who they are, could solve it. Sometimes that's real about entrepreneurship, and that's where the risk comes in. But by and large, the biggest problems that people have as entrepreneurs are related to their personality, their trustability, their closed-minded, their lack of trustability, or they're closed-minded, or they're too open-minded and flighty, or they're too agreeable or not agreeable enough. All these different types of things that get in the way. So at the end of the day, what makes somebody a great entrepreneur is really being cognizant of shaping their personality toward effective entrepreneurship.
Okay, so effective entrepreneurship. And how does one get good at that? Like, I know you have lots of programs maybe to get good at that. So let's talk about that, maybe go right into it to some extent. How does one get good at it? And how do you learn that and sort of figure it out? Or is it somewhat natural, right? And it might be useful to compare and contrast that with some of the people who we've all read about. They don't mean they're necessarily all the best entrepreneurs in the world. They just might be the ones people read about, but the Elon Musk of the world, right? Or Jeff Bezos, or Bill Gates, or the Google guys, like you name it. There's all these people who have been incredibly financially successful, but there's also what are the skill sets they have? Did they just get lucky? Do they always have it? Or can you train yourself to become good at this?
Both. And that's what's really cool about it. So I think that entrepreneurship, because it's so central to personality, meaning that entrepreneurs are generally very open-minded. There are 5 different traits when you measure personality that are the most important. This is called the big 5. A lot of people talk about Myers-Briggs and things, and those are cool and they're neat. But then this is really central to what we do at Leading Giants, but it's central to understanding this in a way that most people never have considered it. But the big 5 traits, there are 18,000 different traits that psychologists put together when they came up with the big 5. And they realized that these big 5 basically run across all generations and culturally, for the most part. There are some nuances. And the big 5 are, you can remember by the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, and to what degree you're extroverted or introverted, agreeableness, and then neuroticism or emotional stability. And interestingly enough, if you're very high in openness and you're also high in conscientiousness, you make a pretty good entrepreneur. Generally speaking, being high in extroversion will also help that, but you need to regulate some of these other things. So why do I say this? The reason I say this is because 50% of our personality is just God-given genetic right from the start. The other 50% we form. So there are some, just like athletes, there are some people born to grow to be 6'5" and just naturally very strong, very quick, all that kind of thing. Well, they can't take credit for it. They can't be like, well, I made me 6'5", okay? They can definitely take credit for what they did with it. That's why the 6-foot athlete who wasn't born with as much can outperform the 6'5" athlete, because they've worked harder and developed it more.
Steph Curry versus maybe LeBron James. And LeBron James also worked really hard too, but
yeah, he did.
Steph had to work even harder to get where he is.
To get there. And those are great examples. So, and when you think about entrepreneurship, there's definitely no doubt about it. Like great entrepreneurs, they've just got like this. You can get in a conversation with a great entrepreneur and you're all vibing. You're like, oh yeah, I get that. And you can be around people who aren't great entrepreneurs. I heard somebody say one time that, if you go to a food truck and you say to yourself, oh, I'd love to have this hot dog stand. I want a hot dog food truck. This looks like fun. You're probably not an entrepreneur. I like the hot dogs. It looks like fun. But if you walked up there and you said, I don't really like the hot dogs, but I tell you what, man, that line was like 15 people deep. They had one worker. They charged, $279. If they charged $350, hired 2 workers and got 2 trucks, they'd double. Then you're an entrepreneur. Yep. And there's that vibe about it. There's a little bit of a natural intuition to that, but we can also definitely learn it. And the other thing too that a lot of people forget is and this is true about my company. One of my companies, this is true about almost all of them, but one of them in particular, whenever we were bought by private equity, which happened a few times, they always said, you're the most technologically advanced company that we bought because of our back office systems and everything else. Now, what's really funny is, an entrepreneur, as a CEO, I don't even know how to build, and you're going to laugh at this because I'm sure you do, an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. I know how to read them. I read them all day long. But like, I see these magic Wiccan cells all going back and forth. I'm like, what did you just do there? Okay. I don't know how to do that, but I read them. And my company was trained on those things. And we had the best, IS department possibly out there, with a team of developers. And so those were important. Now, why is that a good example? Because I'm not good at that, but I found somebody that is good at it. So if you really want to be a great entrepreneur, you don't necessarily have to be the savvy business grower. You just need to find people who you can trust that can do that inside your organization.
Okay, so obviously a few questions from that. So first maybe that comes to mind is, there's two actually from that I really want to ask about. First is, how did you know you needed to build those departments? So if these are areas you don't know well, like you don't even know how to build an Excel, okay, how did you know that it was important to even go do that? Like that was an area that you should go do. And then how did you decide, like, hey, I should go hire someone who's great in this versus trying to learn it myself? Because I come across a lot of founders who say, I need to understand how to do this work myself before I can even go hire someone, because I don't even know the right questions to ask in an interview if I don't understand that part of the business.
That's a great question. So two things about that. One is, even though I don't know how to do those things, I know the importance of them. And I know their usability.
Like, why did you know it was important to be able to read a financial statement?
In the same way you don't have to be an accountant to read the financial statement and the outcome. And by the way, for entrepreneurs and CEOs, we read income statements. I mean, certainly the balance sheet is there. We have to understand it. But the thing that you really read all day long is the income statement, right?
Yeah.
So when you master that, it doesn't take too long to do. But as far as the back office is concerned, a lot of people get fixated on the technology. So if you say something like, hey, we need a new system, maybe even like an AV system. We need something that can put this display up there and it can simulcast over here. And they walk in and they start going, oh, you know what? There's the X272 model, which has 14.7, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, is it going to work? Like when I turn it on, is it going to give me a great image that's reliable, always, that's simple to use? Yeah, I don't need the other details. I literally don't need them. And, a doctor can tell you, take these 2 pills, and then he can give you every single little thing right down to the chemical that it's affecting. Or you can say, and then your headache's going to go away. That's kind of what I want to know. Now, there's times where that you need to know more, but for the most part, that's it. So I knew what I needed to do. I was like, listen, when we are tracking our customers and we want to have high renewal rates and we want great customer satisfaction, I want to know who buys what on a Tuesday afternoon if the wind is blowing from the southwest at 8 miles an hour and that particular customer has blonde hair and they like pepperoni on their pizza. Okay, like I want all the information so that we can be effective in reaching these people and we can establish those patterns. Inevitably, Adam, when I first started doing these sorts of things, people would say, well, nobody has that. That technology doesn't exist. And I was like, listen, it does exist. Like, if you look at the technologies that exist that we are maybe personally unaware of, but that exist out there, they're everywhere now. And so you can find an answer to every question that you need by way of technology. I don't, as the CEO and the founder or the entrepreneur, I don't need to know anything other than what I'm going to use it for the most part. And I think that actually makes some people better CEOs. Because if you know all of the details, just like your developers know the details of the programming, you're going to get in conversations with them like that now challenge their authority, challenge their creativity, that reduce the amount of trust that they have with you. It's micromanaged, and you can't be onto your other things.
I mean, I totally agree, but I could also see people arguing the other side of it, right? Where, once you need this Elon Musk who's sleeping at the factory all night long to get the car out, he knows the details of all these things, and he is a bit of a micromanager for the things that he cares about. But he's obviously very inspirational as an entrepreneur. Forget the sort of political side of him, but as an entrepreneur, very, very inspiring. People join his companies. He's changed the world multiple times because of it. And he goes really deep, and he knows he micromanages certain aspects that he cares deeply about.
So okay, I hear this about Elon, but I can demonstrate that it is a folklore. Okay, in a couple of different ways. All right, and here's how. How many businesses now? Six. massive companies that he's running. Okay. So if it is true that he could micromanage them, we would find him checking the tire pressure on the line for Tesla. Okay. Which means there's no way he could be doing anything else. Now, most people say, I have to work 80 hours to run my company as an entrepreneur and put the grind in for this one business. How do you run 6 if you micromanage? So literally, by a default position, it is impossible that he micromanages circumstances because you can't micromanage one company and effectively lead it. So he is not a micromanager. What he is a target detailer. And there's a very big difference between a micromanager and a target detailer. A target detailer is the person who understands that as you build a business, you have a lot of responsibilities to begin with. And what you do is you make sure you set a target for each one of those responsibilities to have a standard with it. And you are a bull about it. Like, I can remember some of the things that I did in my company that were so entry level philosophies that I was setting up. No, we do it this way. I'll give you an example. We have 1,300 magazines across the country. And one of the things that I said is that we will not have a magazine that features a dog instead of a human. Now, if a dog wants to be on the cover with a human, fine, but we're not going to feature a dog. And there was a very important marketing reason for that. And so here I am looking at magazine covers going, no, it's got a dog on it. Fine. Dog with a person, dog alone. No.
And your team obviously thought they should have a dog, though, right? That's why they're showing it to you.
People love their pets. Well, this is interesting, just marketing side of things. Yes. Dog owners who love dogs love their dogs, and they can't imagine that somebody doesn't love a dog, but that's not everybody. And the people who don't love dogs as much as the dog owners do think the dog owners are a little bit crazy. Okay. But very few people have a problem with the dog owner with a dog because they either love the person or love the dog or love both. So that's what it was. They were alienating certain portions of our people who are like, I don't care about your dog. Now you get both of them. So, but regardless of what anybody's position is on dogs or not, I was going to the mass market to do that. Anyway, I was dogmatic about that as I was examining it. Okay.
Well, why that one area were you dogmatic about? And then why was your team, how did you get your team to a point where you didn't need to be dogmatic anymore about that? And they just know how to vibe.
Well, I sold them on the idea. I convinced them with logic why this was important so that they would buy into the logic of it. A lot of them were dog lovers, by the way, and dog owners. And so they immediately hear, you hate dogs. Nope. Not even closely saying that. Okay. That would be like me saying you hate people. Okay. And I don't think that's true either. Some of them did, by the way, like dogs more, but for the most part, what it is it's both. So I got them to intellectually understand it. And then one or two of them tested it. And then a certain side of me as a CEO, always calm and reserved, but a certain side of me as a CEO came out to express why I will win that test every time. Okay. And that they can win it too if they want. They just can win it working someplace else. Because that dog's not going on the cover of that magazine without a person. Okay. So and I rarely is ever like me or this was absolutely necessary for the company's success. And it proved to be that way, by the way.
But how did you know as a founder that was absolutely the right way to go, right? You could clearly you have this team of smart people you've hired in your marketing department to help you come up with the right things on the cover. You're essentially overruling them and saying I know I'm correct. That I feel it in my gut because you've been at it so long, whatever the reason was to do this right. Lots of founders could go the other way. They make that call and they get it right. And then they feel like they can make that call every single time. Yeah. At some point, they're going to be wrong and boom, the company falls off a cliff.
So I didn't. And I think one of the things that helped them is that I laid out certain guidelines for the way the company was going to be perceived by way of reputation and quality. And I laid those out in general terms, and then I let them make all the decisions about what that meant. Okay. Kind of like if you go to a designer and you say, I want it to be chic and modern. Okay. Well, I'm not telling you that's what I want. Now, if they make something chic and modern, you're like, cool, that's even better than I would have thought of it. But if they make something like, classic and traditional, you can look at it and go, nope. Okay. And it's your concept. It's your idea. You want to build the business. You hired them to do that. That's why that matters. So if you hire people to be app developers in your app developer company and they want to make cars, well, you're not a good boss by giving them all the latitude to make cars. That's not what you're doing. So that was part of it. The second part of it is because I rarely ever went in on a micro detail like that and said, this can't be done. Okay. They knew that if I was doing it, it must be important. I would have my reasons. The other thing too is logic is behind me. There's no person you can sit in front of and say to them, if you love dogs, would you be happy to read a magazine that has a dog and a person on it? They all say yes.
It doesn't hurt the dog owners at all.
It doesn't. Yeah. And so logically I had it. And so it was pretty easy to do, but it was also very easy to show them that some people will not open a magazine with just a dog on it. They don't care. And in fact, not only do they not care, they have a pretty negative opinion about that. Okay. And so I was able to show them why this was real and then follow through on it. Now, once I did that, first of all, you know how I knew that it turned out great, Adam, is that, so we had a very playful, attitude at work. Okay. And we love to play and our culture is very strong. So even though we can talk about these sorts of things,
was everyone in the office, by the way, or was it remote or?
It's over 100 people in the office and then, thousands of people across the country as well, too, because we were located in every state and province. And then our home office was there. We had more than one home office setting, one for production and then another one for administration. But so the production team actually came in and they do the designs and we met at the home office and we were younger at the time. We didn't have hundreds of employees at this time. I mean, at this point is like dozens when you're early on doing this sort of thing. But, they said, hey, Dave, can you approve the magazines this week? Well, that was a funny question because I didn't really approve the magazines. I just went through a couple of times and looked at this particular thing to do. So I thought the request was a little bit kind of like overly docile, but I thought maybe they're just being respectful about this or whatever because I had to come back the second time and say no to the dogs. So they put this in front of me. There's like 50 magazines. I'm just brushing through them and I go through the first 3 or 4 are fine. And then it's like just a cat. Just a dog, just a cat. They had made like 10 fake covers to put on these magazines just to punk me. And then they recorded my expression when I was looking at them.
You're just like, sorry, flipping out.
My face is progressively getting redder and redder and redder. Although I kept my cool. I said, you know what, you guys, we got to talk again. And then they just started laughing when I said that. So that's fun that comes back around to it. But I can tell you the point is, just like Elon, when I was done with that, I went on from it and I had great people in place that took care of it. There's no way, because within my company, we built several companies too. We built 2 additional companies and spun one out and then merged another one back in. And I couldn't be the CEO of all those companies if I'm paying attention, if there's a dog on the cover of now 1,300 magazines, right? That's impossible. And so Elon, while he has a reputation for sticking the landing in certain areas, then walks away from that landing and maybe gets a report on it. But that's very different than micromanaging, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And arguably, it's something I tell founders all the time. I mean, I come across a ton of people, right? My company does back office work. And I come across people all the time who say, oh, I need to understand all the nuances of how HR works and compliance works and finance works. And I'm like, I actually use the Elon example. I'm like, do you think Elon Musk cares at all what payroll system they're using to pay their employees at Tesla? Yeah. You think he ever, that's even a question in his mind, ever? Like, no, obviously not. So why do you care? You care about what you said, Dave, right? Did my team get paid? If my team can get paid, then I need to figure it out and probably fire my head of HR. So getting paid and we're not wasting a huge amount of money on HR. Great. Yeah. Don't care. Just get it done.
Yeah.
So how do you get good at that as a founder though? Once again, I come across all these people who do feel like they need to understand the nuances. They don't know how to delegate or they're scared to delegate. Maybe is a better way to put it.
Yeah. So I love this question because there's this moment, there's this fork in the road that either imprisons you or frees you. And that fork in the road is when you're facing your, director of HR, your vice president of sales, whatever it happens to be, your CFO, and they come in and they start asking you permission to buy this certain system or whatever. Now you start going, well, give me more questions. Let's put a report together, have a presentation. Let's compare the 3, and you get micro involved in that detail. You have imprisoned yourself to being a part of those types of decisions forever in the organization, and you've simultaneously told them you don't trust them. So now you have low innovation. You always have low innovation where you have higher micromanagement. And
people don't feel the freedom, or that's not quite the right word, but essentially the freedom to go make decisions on their own. They don't.
Absolutely. 100% is that. Yes. So instead, what I just did this yesterday. I had a conversation with somebody. I looked and I said, you know what? Here's the thing. There's 3 things happening right here. You're smart. You do this every day. And I trust you. So if you think this is the best thing to do, let me just tell you the outcome on it. It can't fail. It has to work. And I want it to be the most economical thing, but I don't think you'd come to me if it wasn't those things in the first place. So maybe re-examine those. And if they are, fine. And just so you know, if you decide this is not the right one and you get a different program, I don't even need to know that either. I know we're on the same page with what the outcomes are supposed to be. And I know you're smart enough to think about it. So go for it. And then they start making all sorts of decisions they never came to you on that you don't want to be bothered by. And what's so funny is that, okay, Adam, this is all about virtue. All right. Low virtue people are imprudent, and high virtue people have prudence. Prudence is the mastery of decision making. Okay. And there are 3 steps to this. And I can get into those 3 steps of mastering decision making. Because if somebody just says, well, make better decisions, and you haven't in your life, you're like, well, I don't know how. Okay. And that's bad advice. But if you give them the steps on how to do it, you can do it. But one of the ways that you can recognize that somebody is prudent is they make very quick decisions, but they measure the speed of the decision to the weight of the issue. So the bad decision maker during a work week, when you're saying, hey, you want to go grab lunch, they want to take 20 minutes to think about where to go and 20 minutes to read the menu. No, the good business person is just like going to burn out, get something to eat, come back. But if it's their anniversary on the weekend, they're going to take whatever time they want to pick the restaurant out and to look at the menu and enjoy the experience. So it's not condemning one or the other things. It's like, where does it fit? But the imprudent person who wants to take all this time during a week with the menu, they buy a car spontaneously on the weekend, right? So it's like, you got to think it through. So I watch entrepreneurs that get this wrong doing this. Somebody texts them, somebody calls or somebody emails with a question. And they're like, oh my gosh, they're bothering me with these details. I can't believe it. And then they engage the person with the detail, and you see them like grill them on the detail and ask further questions and look for a meeting and get something on the calendar with 2 other people. Okay, well, which one is it? You're bothered that they came to you with this detail, or you're going to indulge in the detail? Because as long as you indulge in the detail, they're always going to come back to you because they're afraid to make the decision on their own. So you just need to say, I trust you, Bob. Boom, bump it back up at them and go. And it's easier.
I have 2 examples. Of course, I can't help but thinking through what you're describing in my own entrepreneurship and me as an entrepreneur. And I'll give you both and see what you think, because I think I'm a decent entrepreneur and pretty good about building teams. But two recent examples that might be pertinent to the team, right? So it's actually both in my head of go-to-market. There are 2 things that occurred. So one, we have this super leaky bucket right now. We are crushing it. We figured out top of funnel, crushing it. Great. Yet everyone's falling out the funnel. Like it's empty. Like literally no one's getting to calls. And we think they're qualified sales at the top. Something changed in the past 2 months to get us to this leaky bucket point. He's doing a great job, fix that part, but something's broken. And then we're literally messaging right before you and I are on this call right now. And I was saying, hey, like this needs to be our number 1 priority. Like we need to figure out what's broken here. And he's like, no, I have other priorities we need to do. I'm like, no. Like this arguably should have been something you should have figured out a month ago before we sort of got into this issue. Like we need to figure out do a systems fix later on. Let's first figure this out. So now I'm kind of jumping into the weeds here because it's sort of an issue, and I'm forcing him to reprioritize. That's sort of issue number 1. And the second one, also related to him, he's usually very good about being frugal. I found a consultant to do some other stuff that I thought would be helpful. I was like, let's just have a call with him. I had a great call with this consultant. And then my head to go to market's like, hey, let's hire this guy for a lot of money. And I was like, I don't want you to just hire the first person that I suggest. Like, that's not usually how I like to roll. So I essentially said what you said. I was like, hey, like, can you do a little bit of research? Let's figure out exactly what we want him to do. What are the right options here? See if there's some other options. Both of having me jumping in, and I feel a little bit of a failure of leadership on that front. What did I do wrong there? Maybe on both of those.
Well, I don't think you did anything wrong. I think you corrected it the right way. So most of business isn't about always preventing things, although we want to. I mean, we definitely want to be prevented. I don't want to understate that. But entrepreneurs are, quite often in their game when they're course correcting. Now, it's a failure of an entrepreneur if they have to, if the plane is like literally crashing. That I'm not saying that. But the course corrections, the unpredictable wins, these are the different types of things that we need to do that way. And I think that you did it effectively. Basically, when you give somebody full ownership, I want you to own the result of what we're trying to figure here. And then you give that to them, you come back, it's amazing how smart they are, as opposed to thinking that you're going to solve it for them. I mean, the kid does not clean his bedroom if mom cleans it for him. And in fact, you'd have to really question the kid's intelligence. Why is he going to bother cleaning his room if he has a maid? I mean, so I think you did it right. Here's this is just fodder between 2 entrepreneurs on something like this. This leaky bucket example that you give, what I always called it in my business is compression, same type of thing, but it's a little bit different. So I always explain, listen, here's compression. when you have something entering a liquid or a gas coming into a tube, if there's no different, if the tube isn't, tighter or weaker at any point, it's the same amount of distance. It's going to come out of the tube at the same pace that it's going in the tube. Okay. Now, what changes that is a hole somewhere. Now, the reason I like this example as opposed to the bucket example is because it's easier to find things. Because you say the first foot of the hose is incoming calls, whatever. The second foot of the hose is our data systems for tracking that. The third foot of the hose is who's responding to it. The fourth foot of the hose is what they're saying when they're responding to it. And you break down every single point of contact here, and then you can now start kind of testing this in a way that makes it a little bit more logical to people as we go through the process. And so we call it compression loss. Very much the same thing you're doing. And
yeah, no, okay. I like that. Compression loss is good too. Yeah, and I think for me, I guess the thing that I felt bad about is essentially saying to my head to go to market, like, hey, like this is a 5-alarm fire that like I've now noticed has sort of come to my attention. We did this review for the end of the quarter, and I was like, oh my God, like this is broken. He noticed it, by the way. Like last week we had a one-on-one about it, but like nothing really changed. And so that's where I'm like, no, like we need to get this figured out. Like, and I told him, go get all the data. Let's go line by line and we'll just do it together. And sometimes I feel like it takes the CEO, to your point about Elon, maybe just like diving in deep on certain things where it's like, this is the biggest issue. And somehow having the CEO focus on it focuses everybody else there too.
Oh, I agree. And I do not consider that micromanagement, because micromanagement is perpetual.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a very different thing. And it also is the type of thing too, Adam, that you experienced where you mentioned to him a week ago, but nothing had changed.
Yep.
Like that's when you start using I thought I communicated 5-alarm fire last week, but I didn't. So let me be very clear. 5-alarm fire, and they're wondering, well, how serious was this? And, it's an interesting thing when you look at the breakdown of how communication happens. This is, again, just a couple of entrepreneurs talking to each other. But if somebody were to ask me, what is the most fascinating thing you ever see in business? It's two people having a conversation and completely misunderstanding each other, but walking out of the room thinking that they actually had a legitimate conversation. At the most surface level, it would be something like you ask somebody in marketing how many people were at the meeting, and it's an essential number that you have to track in order to be effective in marketing. So how many people were at the meeting? And their person responds, a lot. And you're like, okay, well, that's good. But I need a specific number as far as a lot is concerned. How many people were at the meeting? Oh my gosh, the meeting was amazing. We had chicken for lunch, and there was this one speaker. No. Like, I'm asking you directly right now for a specific number, like 17,247. How many people were there? And then, even despite doing all of that and thinking this is very apparent, they still say something like more than last time. And you're like,
are they missing it? They're just missing the point? Or are they on purpose obfuscating because they don't actually have the answer?
Oh, great point. So one of two. Some people do that. Some people will just not give you an answer because they're not doing their job. They're incompetent and they think they can just kind of blow smoke. Okay. And that is a really, really dangerous thing, because those people are very, very manipulative. And sometimes even in the workforce, you can find that to be a person who's a bit of narcissism. And the narcissist always thinks they're smarter than you. So they think that they can just go, you don't want to sell me death sticks. You want to go through, rethink your life. You don't need the numbers. I'll just say a lot. I won't give you the real answers because I don't have them. Just walk away. They read the, how to manage your boss book or something stupid like that. So, and then what happens is other times they don't, for a very different reason. So knowing the difference between the two is where this awesome moment is for the CEO. The other person who might have answered just as derelict and might be even irritating to the leader is very likely an emotional person, but not too emotional. Like, they're just into their job. They wanted this meeting to go so well. They were part of the planner. They're just happy that everything went well, that it was bigger than the other event. They were worried about, should we get this or should we get that? But we picked the chicken. It was a little bit less in money, but people loved it anyway. So they've got this emotional response that represents their loyalty, their hard work, and the great decisions that they make to put the meeting on. And so they just haven't gotten to that number yet. And distinguishing between the two is very, very, very important, because one is the team player that you can train into further information that you just want. And this tiny little infraction of not knowing that exact number right now is like so abundantly forgivable. Like you would trade having to re-ask a third or a fourth time for what they did to make the meeting great in the first place, compared to the other person who's just not doing their job.
How do you know the distinction though? So like, is it at some point the person who's great is going to get you the answer, or we'll say like, yeah, you're totally right, I should have that data, let me get back to you. Like what, or the other versus the other person who's going to keep obfuscating and changing the subject basically.
So a couple of different ways is the patterns generally follow them. If this meeting did look like it went well and it was a good meeting, then, it's likely that this person was just emotional about the meeting. Okay. But if it's a bad meeting and they're trying to hide something, or if your intuition tells you that this meeting isn't going quite right, but they're trying to tell you it is great, and, their answers are like deflective and things, you can eventually figure this out. Now, here's the answer that when you do training, I still am the chairman of the board of Best Version Media, and a few other companies. I have a role that way. But now my company, Leading Giants, this is what I do. I teach people how to maximize their business. Okay. And so as a person who does that, it would be great if I said, Adam, I'm giving you the 3-step process to identify whether or not this person is the team player or they're full of it. Okay. That would be great because I could sell that. But my answer is something I can't sell, but it's the answer. And I'd rather give that.
Absolutely.
Over the years, you start to become very good at this sort of intuition. Yeah. In the same way that you get much better at hiring and you get much quicker at firing, because you start to recognize patterns that are almost difficult to explain to somebody else. And it's the way a soldier can tell that there's something dangerous because of the sounds in nature. It's like that type of thing.
Yeah, so it's instinctual to some extent. Mm-hmm. So I think that's absolutely correct. And we're certainly, I'm better as the leader and as an organization on making sure we're good at those things and getting rid of people who don't fit that. So actually, on that note, I would love to dive in a little bit about building a team, culture, kind of those two things, which sort of go hand in hand. What does that look like for the organizations you've built and the other organizations that you think are great?
Okay. So, again, I know you know this. If you're to look at the number of companies that have great culture, good culture, or bad culture, the companies that have bad culture are by far the most infrequent. Because they generally go out of business.
They die at some point.
They have to die at some point. Okay. So, and the reason I say this, because there's a lot of people that just like to attack businesses and say that this is toxic and that is toxic or whatever. Now, interestingly enough, though, the companies who have excellent, great cultures are also just as few, maybe even fewer. In fact, I would say by far fewer. It's way easier to have a negative culture than not. So the really elite companies with great cultures are definitely outnumbered by very bad cultures, but they go away eventually. And that's the reason that doesn't matter. The sticking point is the companies that have a decent culture, okay? And they have fragmented culture. And one of the reasons for it is they don't have a pattern for marketing, promoting, and reinforcing the culture within their organization. The first thing, that I always tell people is you have to tell people about the culture before they come into it. And you have to be very careful about your wording. So there's a lot of people who they negatively promote things. They promote things very poorly. They say things that they don't realize hurt culture. Okay.
The interviewers who are interviewing new candidates.
Yep. And the company when they set up the culture. Okay. So, for example, one of the things that people gravitate to when they're going to set up a culture is they say things like, we have a culture of excellence. Okay. I would not, by the way, I want every one of my competitive companies to have a culture of excellence.
Sure. It's like almost a default, right? What company doesn't want a culture of excellence?
Right. And the reason I want it is because it's not good for culture. The reason it's not good for culture is that cultures need to be innovative and cultures need to be flexible and cultures need to be highly virtuous. But when you say we have this culture of excellence, you are basically, and by the way, it also puts the leaders up for like pot shots like you and Believe, because the number one American pastime, actually worldwide pastime, is identifying hypocrites. And people want to do that because they're the hypocrite, but they just want to point somebody else's hypocrisy out so they don't have to pay attention to it. So as soon as like the leader comes in and says, we're an on-time company and you always need to be on time, and that dude is late all the time, everybody's going to take shots at him. And even if he is late one day, but he was unforgiving to somebody else that was late, now he's done. I mean, people, they are juicing for that sort of error when you do that. So this ambiguous standard of excellence is like, I'm perfect as the leader. I am excellent. Therefore, I establish an excellent company and I demand excellence in all of you. So I have the same formula for a culture when I set it up. So it's promotable the right way. Our culture is made up of 3 different pillars on one foundation. The first pillar is professional will. The easiest way to summarize that is that you have no right to your successes if you're not willing to own your failures. And we are an organization that fails. But when we fail, we don't fail because we took no precautions. We don't fail because we're whimsically and stupid. We failed because we're human beings, first and foremost, and sometimes we have a bad day. The other reason we fail is because the only way that you can possibly climb is to make some mistakes as you go. And you cannot be afraid of the failure as long as you're handling it responsible. Now, if you think I'm giving a talk about, hey, we're all failures, come on in and fail all the time with us. No, we want to mitigate these things. But I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to fail and I'm going to see it. I'm going to fail and you're going to see it. And the way that we handle it personally and the way we handle it on behalf of each other is going to determine how well we do once that happens. So if you want the right to your successes, and by the way, you're going to have more of those than failures, then you better own your failures and we'll celebrate both. Okay. Now they get that. The second thing, and by the way, I also show them psychologically how self-justification is the second strongest motivator for human beings. And I have some stories for that are kind of humorous that everybody can relate to. The second one is a compassionate heart. And the compassionate heart is super simple. Listen, here's how you approach your colleagues. Hey, I know that was supposed to be in here at 9:00 and it's 9:15. Is everything okay? You start with that. Because what if their answer is, oh, I know. Yeah, my dad had an aneurysm last night. We were in the hospital until 3:00 in the morning. I just got back. I'm so sorry. I'll get it to you by 10. Aren't you glad you didn't seize that moment to go, what the hell? Where is this? How come it's not here? And then they tell you that and you feel like an idiot. Not to mention that if you take that approach first, even if they didn't have their father with an aneurysm, what have you done to increase the odds they're going to lie to you now because of the pressure you're putting them on under? So that's why if you start compassionate, it doesn't mean that you're whimsical, that you don't care about standards, but it means that you assume the best in the other person first, and they're going to do that same thing for you. And then the next one is fun-loving spirit. If we're going to do it, might as well make fake pictures of dogs, put them on the cover, and punk the CEO. And then that's all centered on humility. And humility isn't, hey, we're a bunch of perfectly humble people. Be as perfectly humble as we are. It's precision truth about yourself. It's knowing your strengths. It's knowing your weaknesses. It's admitting them. It's hard to do. Now, when you do that, that like raises people's spirits to want to be a part of that. And it doesn't make them afraid at all. And there's a big difference.
So I love all 3 of those. So this is actually another good question to ask you, right? So once again, if people listening to this, hopefully similar mindset to me, which is like, how do I compare to what Dave is saying as a leader, right? So it's funny, you mentioned like professional will. Like, so speaking of my head of go-to-market, right? So he said last week, he said, we're failing right now this quarter. I don't want any commission because we're not getting it done.
Wow.
That to me was like really meant a lot.
Yeah.
He was willing to say that. Now, once again, he didn't quite take it to the next step where it's like, okay, we need to really figure out what's broken here. But like but that's okay. Compassionate heart, we literally have in our cultural values where we say, assume best intentions. So the first thing is always assume best intentions. And fun-loving spirit, we literally also say like, delight every single part. I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, but essentially delight every stakeholder, right?
Yeah.
Customers, but also yourself, your teammates, your family, everyone else who's surrounding you. And so with all that said, I just said, okay, my culture is fantastic based on what you just said, Dave.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Or not. So what did we get wrong? Where can I, as a founder, continuously improve those things too?
Well, I would say 2 things. One is that if I went into your organization, I'd probably be quite complimentary, and I would say, Adam, you got this figured out. But for the sake of the audience, where people may not have those types of cultures figured out, so culture is not a talk. Culture is not a speech, and culture is not just something that's on the wall. It's a daily conversation. Okay. So culture needs a stage. It needs to be lived out. Okay. So what I do, for example, So we have like, thousands of people across the country that have a sales role, and then thousands of people across the country who combine a sales role with like a small, it's almost like a franchise owner role. So they're like their own CEO of a local market, right? So with that team, I wanted to break down what they need to do every single day to know they're doing a great job. See, it's so funny because culture plays out in the numbers. If you said to somebody, if a wife said to her husband, "Do you love me?" and he goes, "Well, you know that I do," and she says, "Well, how come you never say it?" And he goes, "Well, I said it on our wedding day." She says, "Yeah, it was 15 years ago." She goes, "How come you don't help with the kids?" It goes on and on. "How come you just sit on the couch? How come you never take me anywhere? How come you never buy me anything? How come, we don't celebrate anything?" Well, how long can this guy do all of those things and claim love? You can't. So when people use culture to be just like the vibe alone, it doesn't do it. You know how you have a great culture? You're crushing it. That's how you know. And so it manifests in the numbers. I always say that, greatness needs a stage. Culture needs a stage to perform on. Okay. You can say you're great at the violin, but if you don't pick up a violin and play in front of an audience, nobody's going to really know. Okay. So I say, okay, there are self leadership is tied to this, Adam. Okay. I know you probably have a system because so far we're going back and forth and you're like, actually I have a system for that. We use a different name, but this
part of our thesis as a company is essentially we should have systems for almost everything because it's the only way to build a scalable business in today's world. Is essentially I tell my team all the time, we are building a factory of, in our case, startup back office operations for businesses. There needs to be a system in place that we run ourselves that we can then use to scale ourselves to enable it for every business in the world.
Yeah.
So we try to. And every time there's a breakdown in our systems, like what broke? How do we fix it?
Yes, exactly. All that. So what happens is, and by the way, that's the back office system stuff is just great because if you can tie your back office to every single part of your company, we can have back office conversations about that are fantastic. But okay, so self-leadership and self-guidance are essential.
How do you define self-leadership? How do you define it?
Every single person in the company needs to know if they're doing a great job, a good job, or a poor job without anyone telling them. Okay? And the number one concern of employees is, how am I doing? Okay? And for bad employees, it's how do they at least perceive I'm doing while I'm stealing from the company, at least in time and effort, right? And but the perception of the leader is always there. So I want to prevent an environment that allows for people to steal from the company for their own sake as much as the company's sake, because it is a miserable place for people to be, like hiding remote workers, and we have remote workers, but the ones that hide, and they try to convince you they're overworked and underpaid. If people in corporate America could have like radar that showed how much people who are complaining about how they're overworked and underpaid from home are not telling the truth, it would shock them. Okay. Now, by the way, you and I both know there are definitely companies that overuse and abuse their people. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but by and large, it's the opposite that's happening in most places. So what I do is I say, listen, I want you to know how you know you're doing a great job. There are 3 things you need to do every day. The first thing is you need to get your head right. Okay. You can't be effective at your job if you're thinking about the news, if you're thinking about that doctor's report that you've got to come back, all that, you're getting back, or that financial bad news you just got, or the argument of your spouse. Now, by the way, if you think I'm saying work is more important than that, I'm literally saying the opposite. Those things are way more important than your work. But nobody has ever said, these are words never said, my finances were a wreck, so I neglected my job and they got better. My relationship was horrible, so I neglected my job and it got better. People don't do that. Your work is a part of healing those things. And when you neglect your work, you compound those issues. So you need to get focused on your day, no matter it's good news, medium news, or bad news distracting you. That's one. Because I want everybody's head right. The second thing is guard the culture. And I say this every day on a conference call, then guard the culture. And I repeat the culture. Okay. Strong professional will, compassionate heart, fun-loving spirit, all centered on humility. We talk a little bit about that. I give an example of somebody who exemplified it the other day. And then I say, and then the third thing you need to do is get your 3 appointments. These are for the salespeople every single day. So if I am not able to, or your supervisor is not able to come up to you and say, hey, Adam, great job today. If you got 3 yeses, how did you do today? Great. And will we see that report? Yes. And what will we think? Great. So you can know we thought great. Okay. If you got 2 yeses, how do you think you did today? Not very good. Right. If you got one yes, how did you do? Bad. And you don't need anyone to tell you.
Yep.
Wow. Self-regulation. That's a powerful component for a person to know how they're doing.
Yeah. No, in for you, like once again, if you're an early entrepreneur, how do you set those up? Like if you don't even know what the metrics are. So sales is kind of straightforward. Lots of their jobs are a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah, they are.
How do you help set that up for the jobs? Or can you track it for almost every job and say, look, there's a high level goal that you should be achieving every day or every week?
Yeah, I think you can track it for every job.
Okay.
One of the ways that you can track it for a job is if it's a little bit more of a subjective role, there should be a subjective summary of that role that they need to provide as a very simple report. By the way, reporting in my company, so minimal. Like, especially when you think about salespeople, most salespeople are bogged down with so much paperwork. It drives them crazy because your best salespeople hate paperwork.
Yep.
The reporting that our salespeople needed to do, I always would laugh. I would say that reporting will take you on a Monday. And by the way, our back office was so good that most of the reporting was done, right? Automatically without having to do anything. But the reporting that you're going to need to do is going to burn about 1/3 of a calorie and take 1/3 of a second because you're going to have to press the number 1 through 12 in on a Monday morning in a text and send that to your group leader. And that's it. So this sounds like I might be opposite of that when I say this, but in a more subjective role, reporting is subjective. So in order for them to know how they're doing, they need to subjectively report. Now, I would still put those things in as much of an objective measure as possible, but I can really hardly think of any role in my businesses at all, from general counsel to CFO to chief production officer to lead customer service, chief developer. None of these people had jobs that didn't have some sort of an objective measurement. And the reason for it is because when they're setting out their deadlines for themselves on more subjective work, they're setting out objective deadlines for that subjective work. And that's what we're measuring when we take a look at it.
Are you setting those objective goals on a quarterly basis, annual basis, monthly basis?
So I let them all do it on their own. So I'll go to them and I'll say, there's something that we need to get done as a company. We need to reach this particular goal, this market, this sale, this technology. We have to do that. Okay. Now, since you're the one who does this every day and I don't do it, I want you to build a plan for us to go from here to there. Now, I do need to tell you that I want you to be able to just kind of like lay out whatever timeline you want. Unfortunately, we need this done by, 8 months from now. So then I always follow it with this way. So if we need something done 8 months from now, okay, if you've got 2 hammers to finish this project and that's going to take 16 months, then buy 4 hammers and get it done in 8 months. So you have the power, the resources, and the decision-making capacity to get it done in 8 months. So you can't say, well, that's an unrealistic goal. Then buy 10 hammers. Because I'm telling you right now, that 8-month goal is more important than what it costs the 10 hammers thing. Now, we don't want to be silly about how many hammers we buy. So this is the authority that you have to get it done by then. Put together a great plan, make it as economical and reasonable as possible. I also tell them this is very important. Right now, you're like, oh my goodness, he's asking me to do this big project. It's due in 8 months. That's a big project. Is he asking me to break my back? No, I'm not. I don't want you to work any more to get this done. I just want you to be efficient to get it done. I'm not asking you to lay down your life on the altar of company X, okay? I'm asking you to get this project done. Now you free them from stress, which opens up their mind. You give them authority, which increases ingenuity. And so in the same way that my company has like the vacation policies, take a vacation when you want, you work where you want, when you want, how you want. We don't have any limits on any of these things at all. What we find is most people do not take the normal amount of vacation time or sick days as companies that put restrictive time on them, and they're happier about it. And by the way, we did this before it was cool, just not incidentally. Going back all the way to the early part of the turn of the century. The reason for that is if you treat them like adults, they rest more. They have an invigoration that is currently there, and it's a reduced amount of stress level and a greater intensity for what they want in the workplace. And so it's super valuable when you give them that sort of authority and they come back with it.
I totally agree. I mean, we tell our team all the time, like, we hire you because you are a professional. And if you get it done, amazing. If you don't, like, we'll know, we'll have a conversation about it. But talking about like measurements, what about the one key job, which probably most people who are listening to this, founder and CEO, how do you metric your own goals on a weekly, monthly cadence, right? You're not reporting to anyone. Maybe you have a board you're reporting to, but overall, how do you track that for yourself? Because I find like every week I'm from one thing to the next, or kind of a little all over the place. I don't love that.
Yeah.
I do have some key goals I have for myself in the quarter that are tracked with everyone else that I need to hit. But overall, like, how do you do that as a CEO and founder?
So I think the great thing about that is that at the end of the day, you're accountable to your projections.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really it. So I like to make this simple and then break it down afterwards. But this was an area where we just didn't miss. I mean, founded the company in 2007 and just never missed projections Now, there was one time when we were going to sell the business and we were off on our projections by like 1%. Now, you and I both know you might as well be off by 100 miles if you're off 1%. And it happened to be an economic thing that took place, and there was a shift in a couple of things that happened we didn't foresee coming. So it was a forgivable mistake to them, but it's still enough for them to be disinterested when you're off by 1%. And that is just what it happens.
It's so amazing. I mean, they hit it that often, right? So many public companies who have very big professional organizations get this right, miss their numbers all the time by wild amounts in some cases.
Yeah.
How did you guys get that right on such a regular basis? What are the systems you set up for your team? Were you just good about setting your goals? Like, instead of over projecting, you sort of set a lower goal and you kind of sandbagged it, but a little bit maybe sandbagged it. Like, how did you get this right?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it sandbagging, but we were growing, between 20 and 200% a year. Yeah, I don't know that I'd call it sandbagging, but actually, Adam, I would say it was conservative.
Okay, conservative. I mean, that's the right way to go. I think that's something I need to get better at as a founder myself. I always have an over confidence in our ability to get things done and where we're going to go. And maybe being a little bit more conservative is the right way to go.
So this is what I learned. I learned young that people want to be on a winning team and they want to trust the judgment of the leader.
Yep.
And as soon as you say, we're going to grow by 35% and you grow 30%, they say, I don't know if I can trust his judgment. He's overly optimistic. And if we're supposed to do 35%, maybe we're not the winning team I thought we were. Yeah. And isn't that crazy? Because 30% is really killer for most companies, depending on how big they are, right? And so that's why I think it's better to say, listen, I want to give you a couple of different things we're going to talk about here. Our projections for the year right now are 25% in that particular year. Okay. It's a stretch to get there. It's going to be hard. I just want you to know, by the way, when I wake up every day, I'm going to be thinking about 35%. But I don't necessarily have a plan for 35% because it's a pretty far stretch, but I know that it's exciting to wake up and do, almost like Jim Collins' BHAG idea. And, I suppose if the world ended, we might do 20% as we're preparing for the end of the world. But there's just no way I want that to happen either. So we're going to firmly hit this 25%. We're going to go for it as a team. And then when you come in at 30%, that's pretty heroic. And I think it's a good place to be to get there. Because I've seen too many people destroy their companies by people. See, one of the bad things is as soon as somebody goes, well, you ever hear this before? Well, of course they overestimate things. They're in sales. Or of course they underestimate things. They're an accountant. Okay. I think that these stereotypes are very bad. And I also think that the CEO needs to be the child of the two. Like if sales and the accounting had a baby, it comes out reasoned like the CEO who has to play on both sides of that. And as soon as somebody says, well, because they're the CEO and this company is their own baby, of course they're optimistic. They now use the optimistic filter when they talk to you about everything. And as soon as you say the fish was this big, they walk away going, the fish must have been this big. We're going to go for this amount. Well, he's going to be okay if we actually get this amount. But when that dude says 25%, we always hit it. That means he means what he says what he means, and we can understand it.
I need to get better at that. That is a great lesson, a great learning as a founder. I think especially as you get past the early days when it's just you have a board to report to you, you have other people to report to you, and a team that's really looking to you. They need to see that consistency. Right? So going back to the question about like a founder, what should they be doing? Is their report that their job is essentially to make sure everyone on their leadership team have pure
Yeah.
chance of hitting their targets? Like, what are the right things the founder you're doing right there to make sure you're doing your job day to day?
Okay, I call it TTP in the AM. Talk to people in the morning. The number one thing that a founder needs to do is influence his key people. Give them full responsibility and influence them. So, Adam, you have kids?
I do have a few.
Okay, so I have all adult kids. I still have a freshman in high school, but the rest are all adults and out on their own or in college. And I have nine kids, 9 grandkids, so big family.
Wow, congratulations! First of all, you look wonderful. I need to get whatever longevity routine you have. So
it's my longevity routine. You can't have my longevity routine because it includes me chasing my wife around all the time because she's got so much energy.
I mean, also good. That's lucky you.
So, but the thing that I was going to say is that TTP in the AM. So this natural human principle is the same for all of us at any age. So when you're a little kid and you're in the kitchen or you're in the garage with dad, wherever you are, and you say, okay, let's mix the eggs. Okay, what does the kid do? Grabs the thing. I want to do it. They grab the drill or the hammer. I want to do it. Okay. Human beings.
This morning, by the way, right over here, my kid's going off to camp. My son is like, I'm going to switch suntan lotion on myself. That is just lathered. Half his face got sunscreen, the other half didn't, et cetera. So.
Yeah, they want to do it on their own. And part of that learning process, maybe not for a little kid like that to have like a burnt side of the face, but the going through the making the mistake, maybe even get a little bit hurt, which is okay too, So, these are the types of things that happen here. So I was going to say that, when you're talking to that, 30-year-old sharp person in one of your divisions and you say, no, I'm going to hammer it and you're going to watch me. They're like, why did you hire me? Not only did I want to grab the hammer when I was 2, I want to grab the hammer now. And don't you have other things to do besides grab the hammer? So instead, what you do is you just go to them and you say, just checking in. How's everything going? Just here for you if you need anything. And they'll give the report and you'll look at data and that's important to look at, but that's not micromanagement. That's support. How can I help you is a great question to ask. Okay. And they know you're not going to help them by getting down on the line and hammering widgets. You're going to help them by increasing their authority or increasing their, resources in some sort of way. And that's what great CEOs do. They target resources and authority toward people that need to get it done. So I knew this, and this is how Elon did it. And I had 3 companies at the time, so I didn't have as many as him, and they weren't as big, but, it still was a lot of responsibility, is that I would make sure that I had contact with each one of my key leaders in each one of the organizations. Sometimes I was done with that by 10 o'clock. And I was done for the day. And people, and by the way, I never had the culture where I made people to work late. In my companies, I know it sounds crazy, outside of some of our very committed people, like our CFO, who just will work like a madman, even when I'm telling him, stop, why don't we hire somebody else so that you can work half the hours he just wants to do it, right? But for the most part, if you were in my businesses past 4 o'clock or 4:30, people were like, what are you doing burning the midnight oil? Okay. And they were done early because they had the ability to get things done early. Now, we all know there are certain jobs like air traffic controller where you can't leave early. I mean, you are there for a particular reason, and so it's, you don't want to be like utopian about this. There are certain sacrifices people have to make according to their roles. But that was the way that it was. And it was for me too. Now, that meant some days as a CEO, I was working incredibly long because that was necessary and you needed to do it. But for the most part, once I got people in place, I didn't have to do it. I didn't want to do it. And if I was sticking my nose in their duty and their role, it would have been more frustrating for them and everybody else in the business. But the very fact that they had this swagger of owning their results, knowing that at no time when we were going to celebrate a great success in their division, they were never going to hear me walk in and somehow take a little bit of credit for it. And they had the assurance of knowing that they were going to get that praise because they did it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I used to laugh. I used to say this to him. I'd say, hey, by the way, we all know what you did. You came in, you made this efficiency, you crushed it, you killed it. You're getting all this incredible recognition, which you deserve for all the work that you did. But just so you know, I take the credit because I picked you. And they always laugh, like the only credit I'm taking is that I put you in the role. They know that that's not taking credit. That's another way to further increase the the fun-loving spirit of the organization, and to, in a strange way, re-put the recognition back on them in a way that assures that they know they're the one who did it. So there's all sorts of ways, just it's interpersonal, but that's all.
It's reinforcing the organizational principles and culture that make you strong in the first piece. And it's okay. You're done at 10 a.m. Did you go off and play golf? Like what happens after that? Like, or, how do you organize your life and day once you have these great people in place? And then it's all into that. And I have a bunch of more other questions too.
Yeah. So I would say that it would be, some days I enjoyed the day, but mostly just because I got done with all the responsibilities that I knew I needed to do to spool the thing up and go, I just wasn't done because I'm a productive person and I wanted to continue. So that gave me an opportunity to say, hey, now that that's all done, what view do I have of the business that I didn't have before? And how can I make this even better? So I'd engage further in the business and I wouldn't just like cash in my chips and go home. Or what I would do is, that's how I became a pilot, is that I would be like, okay, well, what can I do? How can I learn something else that's going to be good for this business and good for me and good for my life? And pilot training, I would say, for anybody who becomes a pilot, they could become a better CEO as a pilot, because of the things you're forced to learn and the ways that you're supposed to measure risk and contingency, but willingness to take risks are fantastic. And I knew that sort of formation, kind of like when people want like Navy SEALs training in order to be a better leader, pilot training is phenomenal for that. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to get all sorts of benefits from doing this all at one time, or I'm going to have an opportunity to write another book, 6, by the way. Then,
Elon, you write 6, you run 6 companies, you write 6 books. Okay, wait, so can I sum up a little bit that maybe being a great entrepreneur is about kind of the ability to essentially like delegate, hand off, trust your team and get those things done in a weird way. Like the fewer things you have to do when people are hitting their targets, the better. That is the way you metric and track your success.
Yes, but there's a step that comes before that to make that all possible, which is the most important one. And that is find the right people.
Right. Literally, thank you. That's a perfect segue to the next section when I ask that. How do you find the right people?
Yeah, because if you don't do that, you never get that benefit that you were just saying right there, because now you're spending your time replacing people and fixing all their problems and everything else. Yep. So what I found is that, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's really no correlation between Myers-Briggs testing and then effectiveness in a role.
I've tried a lot of those and I've never found it to be worth the time and energy and effort. It's kind of fun, but beyond that,
by the way, it is kind of fun, and I don't find them entirely useless. In fact, I'll even talk about those to some degree because they're readily accessible to people and they're kind of interesting, and almost everybody has done them. I default back to the big 5 all the time, but even that has massive limits for a couple of different reasons. Okay, so a couple of things on this. The Myers-Briggs is interesting because it's like, you're insightful for yourself. But one of the reasons that most of these programs aren't good is because you have placating people whose business model intentionally is not effective, and it's placating. Hey, Adam, I want to go in and tell your team how awesome all of them are. I want to show them their genius in every single way. They're one of 16 personality types, and each one of them is number 1, and here's why. Well, no. How about this? You know what? Your personality kind of sucks. So let's fix it. If you think about it, the way that you look at personality is this. You'd say, like, everybody in your workforce or in your life, you'd say, I really like them, but I wish they were a little bit more. Or I really like them, I just wish they were a little bit less. Or I cannot stand this person because I wish they were more, or I wish they were less. That's always found in their personality. And us too, by the way. I can tell you, I always tell people, listen, if you know me this well, I love Dave. I wish he was a little nothing more or less. You don't know me. Yeah. Okay? Because there's plenty that I should be more of and plenty that I should be less than. And I have to work on this my whole life. I mean, I want to come back to this how to hire thing, okay? This little tangent, but it's so relevant. If you were in Bill Belichick's, or the Golden State, or the Bulls in the day, okay? Or the Packers since the beginning of time. I'm originally a Green Bay kid, so okay. And you were, let's use Belichick.
You look a bit like Brett Favre, by the way. I don't know if you've heard that before, but I think
I have not heard that before. And depending on what decade, that would have been received more or less complimentary. Yeah. If you're in Belichick's locker room, okay, the 6th season that they won the Super Bowl, okay, there is no way at practice he's going to go, "Hey, you guys, you're all awesome. No one needs to improve. Goodbye." So these are the best athletes of all time ever collectively in one room in the history of the world in what they do. And their coach and them, even without the coach, are constantly going to be saying, bigger, faster, stronger, more united, quicker, off the ball. They're thinking about getting better every single day that entire time. Yet when it comes to our personality, most of us, metaphorically speaking, haven't made it past 8th grade football, and we're patting ourselves on the shoulder going, I'm done. No, 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 no. This is a lifelong process that never goes away. So our values and our virtues and our ethics and our morals and our skills, our ability to communicate, to decipher, to discern, to have self-control, our sense of justice, it's all manifest in our personality. And so what personality tests fail to do, and Myers-Briggs and everything else, is they do not recognize virtue. Okay? Virtue is the repetitive habits that we form, and repetitive habits is kind of redundant, but they're the repetitive habits that we form that become instinctual to who we are, demonstrated in our personality. So, for example, if you're talking about courage or fortitude, if you're a brand new soldier and you're thrown into war right away and you happen to do things courageously, that doesn't mean you are courageous because you had no time to build it. It means you used courage, you acted with courage, okay? But if you're the seasoned one who went through this time and time and time again, and in a regular, committed, frequent, reliable fashion, you always act with courage, you're acting from courage. It's actually a part of your personality, which is why we know immoral people who sometimes make a moral decision. So they act with fairness or justice, but not from fairness or justice because that's not their normal pattern. The reverse is also true. You might have somebody that has strong fortitude and they have their moment of fear. That's fine also. But for the most part, they're acting with it the entire time. So when I interview people, I ask questions primarily directed toward, well, by the way, once I know they have their resume, I'm not going to hire a general counsel that's not a lawyer. I'm not going to hire...
It meets certain criteria, basic levels, for certain criteria for each role.
Yeah, for each role. By the way, not incidentally, one of our top developers in our IS department who's built our back office was a theologian. He had no formal training in programming, but he became very good at it just on his own because he understood reason and logic and philosophy. And we're like very, very dubious. He came on a referral from one of our other employees. So we said, well, let's give him a shot. He's been one of the best we've ever had before. And so why though? Here's the key thing is you look at virtue. So the number one question, Adam, that you ask, and by the way, I posted this, Stephen, did I post this online, right? I posted online one time and it got tons of response. I said, the best question you ask somebody to determine whether or not they'd be good at a role is you ask them, what's the last thing you did to sacrifice and for whom? Okay. Boy, that was received so well by so many people in this fashion. It's like, what a great question. I hadn't thought about that. Oh my gosh, you can learn a lot. Oh, I'd love it if somebody asked me that question because I know about them interviewing. And then there was a massive number of people saying, no way, I would never sacrifice anything for any company ever. And what they didn't realize was like, dude, you're exactly who I want to ask that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're unwilling to sacrifice, and it's not just about the company, it's just sacrifice for someone else.
Just in general, like, does your character show that you're willing to actually do something, not for you?
Yeah.
I mean, a sacrifice doesn't have to be big. It's the last bite of your candy bar. It's being in a hurry, but letting somebody merge in front of you in a car. It's also, going to visit your sick mother, every single day for 6 months while she's dying of cancer. I mean, there's a lot of different things that people do to sacrifice, but a person who is unable to relate to the value of sacrifice is always a bad employee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. All right, I might add that to my list. And so, okay, so is that essentially, so someone has the basic qualifications, and then
virtue,
whole hiring process you have internally, and then they all get to you at some point, or when does that stop?
No. Almost nobody ever got to me. I didn't hire anyone. I mean, I hired the chiefs. If I was hiring somebody that was a C-suite, chief executive, or a COO, or when I moved into the chairman position and I promoted the CEO, but I raised them up from the beginning. I very rarely ever hired somebody into a chief role that I didn't nourish within the organizations themselves. I like the promotion from within idea as best as possible. And I have the foresight to plan that far, far ahead, knowing, hey, you know what? In 8 years, I'm going to move from this role. So I better find my replacement now. Get 5 people in who could be candidates toward that. Don't tell them that's what they're doing. And then just measure them as they're going and then start to reveal that as we get a little closer to who that lead person is. And then you're all set. But the other hard part about this, though, Adam, is that even though I talked about trying to hire with virtue, you can do better by asking these questions, but you can't really know until you work with the person. Mm-hmm. And if you are really paying attention to that early on, you're going to do much better than if you're just paying attention to their competencies. You're paying attention to like what they're bringing to the table a little bit more on the inside.
In when you say pay attention, but you have to get them on board, right? You can ask these questions during the interview, but finally someone comes on board. What do you think your hit rate was of success? Like, or maybe said differently, what was your average on people who you'd end up firing within the first month or two because it wasn't a fit? Because no company gets it right.
Right. So we were kind of fortunate in a couple of different ways. When we brought people on at the base entry level position that included some sales, we had a certain amount of turnover there initially, because we just had to see whether or not it's almost like if you're going to start with Northwestern Mutual in insurance sales, you just know that as soon as the first person makes their phone call, they're out, right? And the only way to find that out is to go through the process. So we had a little bit of that. But once they actually reached the level where they were fully like certified in their role, we had only 10% turnover, which was unbelievable in that particular role. That was an independent contractor sales role, by the way. Wow. Independent contractors usually have 90% turnover. We had about 10% in their role. Employee turnover, our involuntary turnover, was less than 2%. On our voluntary turnover, which is what you're specifically speaking of, they come into the role, we're dissatisfied with them, we fire them within 2 months, less than 1%.
It's amazing. So you have a really good process.
Well, one of the reasons is because more than 50% of our hires for employees internally in our office were referrals from within the company. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was really, really good way to do it. So when we had a role, somebody wanted it. The other thing too is that we almost never didn't promote from within. So when we were bringing people into positions, for the most part, they weren't as skilled with as much responsibility because those people were now in director level positions within the organization. So we never had to bring somebody into a director role from the outside, discover they weren't who we thought they were, and then fire them. They'd already been with us for a couple of years and proved who they were from a virtue perspective and competency by the time they got into the director role. And so you can actually have a certain amount of flexibility with roles that are a little less skilled and less crucial by way of, everything is crucial. Your pinky is crucial in your body because it's a part of your body, but it's not the same as your heart, right? And so we always promoted our pinky to our heart. We never just hired a heart. And so it made it easier.
So sort of hiring piece, going back. So two questions. One, can you go over time a little bit?
Oh yeah. No, I'm fine.
Great. Okay. Cause I have a bunch of other key questions that I really want to dig into. So one, just at a high level, like going back almost the beginning of Dave Durand's career, like how did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur? How did you become an entrepreneur? And then so that's sort of one part. And then related to that, would love to dig in a little bit more of your story of how you ended up building this company to hundreds of millions in sales from 500K when you sort of got in there. Like, but what was its history of how it started, which all led you to kind of obviously the person you are today, where you have a ton of knowledge and experience.
Sure. So I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur because I didn't know what one was. My dad was an engineer. I came from a family of engineers and teachers. And then some distant cousins who were, maybe attorneys, but everything else from painter to whatever. And so I didn't really have too many like business examples. And when somebody said, hey, you should go into business, I didn't even know what that meant. I thought, well, isn't everything business? And then what happened though is I started selling Cutco knives when I was in college.
I've talked to you recently about a similar story. Yep.
You did? You said?
Yeah. Someone else also selling Cutco. Doing some of that, just like go door to door.
Yeah. And by doing that, I learned two things. One is that I hate to sell, but
you're good at it.
Well, I hated it. And I learned that and the only time that I actually was directly in sales was for 3 months that summer as a college kid. but I learned I had better be good at this. So I became the number one rep in the office that I had in the region in the top,
Why,
one.
why do you think you realized you had to be good at it? Like what?
Because I started to recognize early on that I will like business and I want to be in business. And I was like, man, if there's a person that I'm going to have a Christmas card list out for, it's going to be the people who are paying the bills. And those are the salespeople. And I realized this is hard and you have to receive a lot of rejection. If somebody's going to be willing to do this, I better be good to them. And I'd better know how to do this and be competent at it so that when I'm speaking to them, I have their respect. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that I built a company at hundreds of millions of dollars, because I love training and I love teaching and love writing books. And I didn't want to walk into a room and have people go, oh, he's just an author. I wanted to walk into a room and have people know that I've gone through the battles myself. So when I'm giving you advice, that matters. So I was like, I wanted to put my money where my mouth was. So I learned that. I just knew it intuitively. And I would call that God's grace, by the way, when I was very, very young. So, 18, 19. So I did that, but then I immediately got into leadership into that company, and it's like a franchise. So I opened one of the 900 franchises across the country and ended up being number one for several years in a row. They promoted me to national training director. So even though I owned my own franchise, I would then train the company and start writing company programs and routines. And
you were like 24 or something.
Oh yeah. By the time I was 24, I was the youngest person ever inducted into the Hall of Fame of the company of that business. And they were recruiting 100,000 people a year.
Wow.
So I ended up building a lot of that business, but then because I was an independent contractor, I could start other companies alongside it. And that's when I started a lot of other small businesses, from training and consulting to just like in the early 90s or the mid 90s, I did a fitness video that I wanted to do because I was like, okay, well, I mean, this is back in the day of VHS, right?
Yeah. Keep Windows on YouTube if they do a search for.
You could search right now and look up Kicking Abs by Dave Durand, and it's still out there.
I hope you're wearing some great neon, like good old 90s.
It's, by the way, I got to tell you, the production level of this is like Buns of Steel era. Okay. But I was like, okay, if I produce this and am a part of the editorial process, and then I build a commercial and I air the commercial on ESPN2, and I build up back in the Windows 95 days, I build up an actual system for receiving credit cards and processing orders, and I go through that delivery process, and I do my own publicity. What is that going to look like? And I was like, this is a great way to learn a lot about business. So I'm going to pick this project. And I picked a new project like that every single year. And then I thought, okay, I want to build a magnum opus. And for about a decade, I kept saying to myself, I'm going to build a company. I know what the culture is going to be. I know how great the opportunity is going to be for the people in it. I just don't know what the product is. And then in 2004 or so, a guy that worked for me said, hey, I've got a friend whose brother sells ads for a local mom and pop magazine. And I was like, it was like love at first sight. I was walking the airport. I remembered exactly. And I was like, that is exactly it. And as it turned out, they wanted me to partner in a particular way. I was disinterested and also kind of unable because they worked for me and there were some fiduciary responsibilities that I had. But in 2007, I ended up getting into that business with two other partners, and I was a not so silent partner. And even due to conflict with another business, I kind of divested myself from the business for a period of time. But I was always there for the beginning. So I was a founder of the business. And then for about 5 years, I helped the guys get through their incubation and build a product that worked and build a system that worked, but they didn't have the experience to blow it up.
And you're running on the side still the Cutco stuff or sort of other franchises?
And several things at the time. I had started 3 other companies at the time that were doing really well. I mean, when I say really well, between 10 and maybe 25 million. So they weren't like.
It is really. I mean, how many people ever get a business to even 10 million in revenue? I think that's a teeny tiny percentage of the world.
Yeah, it was, and so it was fun. So, but then I was like, I want to build a magnum opus, and so
why did you want to build that? Like, what do you think psychologically?
Well, one of the questions that you kind of asked me, just as we looked at, as I was looking at the pre-notes was, what's the worst time in business you've ever gone through?
Yeah.
The worst time in business that I ever went through is, I went through divorce after 20 years, and I was married with 6 kids, and just not a believer in divorce at all. So that was, and I was with my kids for dinner every night. That was just like one of the lowest times in life. I don't really talk much about that. But the reason that I need to talk about it is because that's the type of thing that takes most entrepreneurs out of the game.
Yeah.
It's not something really about the business. It's something they're managing in their life, like an illness or a relationship or a stress, or for some an addiction, or in fact, sometimes divorce leads to addictions, and they can't get out of it. But I knew I needed to take care of my family. And so I was going through that time. And when I left entirely the Cutco business, I decided to get into Best Version Media full bore. I called my two partners and I said, guys, I want you to sit down. I'm in full time now. And I actually literally said this. I said, you listen to what I'm about to tell you. I will make you wealthy beyond your imagination. And one of the things that I've enjoyed the most, Adam, about selling companies for hundreds of millions more than one time is the number of people who have become millionaires because of that process. It's not just you. A lot of people hear that and they go, oh, you sold it for X number, 100 million. Did you put all that in your pocket? No, in order to get into that place, what you're doing is you're intentionally lining up. That guy right there is going to make 10 million. He's going to make 20 million. These people here who are earning X amount are going to get a $500,000 paycheck, blah, 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 blah. And you start working on that sort of thing. And you start to have this like energy of fun and enthusiasm because you see the good that comes from what happens for everybody else.
Yeah, listen, I feel the same way. I sometimes, when we do lose people every once in a while, I feel like, oh my God, what are you're leaving this? Like I'm going to make you wealthy and you're leaving it. And then I also feel like it's a failure on my part. I haven't clearly explained that well enough to make them want to stick around. But how do you think your partners, I mean, even on that note, like how did your partners react, right? They could have been like, okay, Dave's like kind of full of it and he's coming in. He's like, I'm jumping in and these two guys are working on this all the time. You're like, all right, make space. Here comes the big dog. I'm taking over. We're going to go crush. Or they're like, heck yeah, thank goodness you're here, Dave. We've been waiting for you to come save us from our slight mediocrity and we haven't pulled it off yet.
It's very interesting when you say that on the personal level. They were not really my peers, and they knew that. I was older than them, maybe, 12 years older and more experienced. They didn't have a resume like I had, not at all. One of them used to work for me directly in another business. That was very easy. Super great guy. And immediately was like, okay, go. At the same time, though, he was doing it for 5 years full time. And there was a little bit of a, well, Dave, I'm not sure if the things that you did really translate thing. But he's such a good guy and he's so high virtue that any amount of that he had was a reasonable amount. It wasn't unreasonable. In fact, had he not had the amount of that he had, he wouldn't have been reasonable. Yeah. But he's such a high virtue guy that it was easy to overcome. The other guy, I got him a job a couple different places, but I didn't really know him very well. And he, I think, had a certain amount of pragmatism about him that said, even if I want to be the lead dog, which he wanted to be, I can't argue that for 5 years we've done $500,000.
Yeah, it wasn't a blazing success that he could point.
Well, within 1 year we did 2.5. Within 2 years we did 9. Within 3 years we did 19. And we had a 9-figure exit 6 years later. And so it was pretty. It got easy as they started seeing it develop.
What did you put in place when you're like, okay, I'm coming in, I've looked at this from the side? Well, sort of two questions. Like one, why you didn't quite combine, like, okay, you have this divorce, obviously really difficult for you in your life. Mm-hmm. What pushed you then to say, I'm going all in on this. I'm changing this whole other company I've been doing and I'm just going all in on this new thing. I've had this personal challenge and I'm going to go change my career as well. Like, why? That sounds like a lot to do.
Well, okay. So
you made the easy choice. You just say, I'm going to keep this money running, take care of my family, and I'm going to focus really on the family.
But the financial circumstance when it came to the Cutco business became precarious because that company at the time came on bad times. I think they're doing well now.
I was actually wondering what happened at Cutco. I haven't seen, no one's knocking my door.
I think they're having a really good year. I still have some friends, two friends that are the CEO of the business, two mutual CEOs on East and West Coast. Good guys, good company, good culture. But at the time that I left, it wasn't doing very well. And truth be told, one of my friends who's the CEO fired me. And he fired me, I think, more out of an act of compassion because I would get a little bit of a payout. But he knew I was going through a ton and I was dissatisfied there because I had more of an entrepreneurial, innovative mind, and I provided a lot of suggestions and the ideas, the company that they just weren't ready for.
Yeah.
And he wanted to kick me out of the nest for my own sake, so that instead of doing these smaller businesses on the side, I could just drive something big. So he helped me along with that decision. But when he did it, he asked me if I was trying to get fired, by the way, just non-incidentally. Like, in other words, we're both mutually ready to go. He remains a close friend today, by the way.
That's great.
But I was ready to go. And I was more ready to go for this reason. 6 kids, college coming up, enormous amount of money, divorce laws in Wisconsin, very unfair. I was paying out more than I was earning, and I couldn't afford to live on zero. So I had to do it. And that was it, man. The choice was.
So you had this other thing going on. You're like, I'm coming in. So what do you put in place? 5 years, $500K, and then you said what? You're at like almost 2.2 or 3 million a year later. Like what?
Yeah, 1 year later we were at 2.5. So what it was pretty simple, actually. I just went in and I said, okay, so the concept, they didn't understand the concept of the bigger you grow, the more responsibility you have, but the less responsibilities. So I'm going to put you in this role. You're going to be chief production officer. You're going to be chief operations officer. And I want you to take every single thing that you do and hire somebody to do it for you so that we can go to the next things. And I will go drive revenue by building the sales team while we're building the internal systems together. And then I did that. And there was some argument. Nobody knows how to do this better than I know how to do it. I can't delegate it. Okay. That's not true. I'll give you 5 examples. And if my conversation isn't enough for you to do it, I'm going to hire a 19-year-old person who didn't even go to college to do this part of your job, which you claim nobody can do better than you. And within 1 week, they're going to do it at least equally well or better. I did that. I actually had to go to that point and did it. And once I did that, he's such a quick learner. Never had to talk to him about it again. This is the super high virtue guy. He immediately got it and he was after it. And it was such a pleasure to work with somebody like that, right? But there are a few other things that just through like ignorance, like, hey, we need to hire somebody to build a great back office, which is a big paramount thing. And he goes, well, they're paying people on Excel spreadsheets. And I'm like, listen, you can pay 2 people sales commissions at this complexity at that level, but we're going to have thousands of them. You need to do every single thing here times 1,000. And if you can't just press one button and have those commissions get paid out like that, and then tie that back to our marketing team for production, tie that back to the accounting team, eventually there too, tie that back to the sales training and recruiting team. So all of this back office data interacts between everybody in one place in one simple way with a simple view. We can't run this business. There is no technology like that out there. That's what he said. I said, yes, there is. I've never heard of it. It doesn't matter if you've heard of it. If I said to you, that's like when I started growing the business and, you'd be at a certain level. I mean, now we have 35 million readers across North America. We're kind of a well-known brand. But before we were at that level, some people would say, well, I've never heard of the company. And I was like, okay, like that's supposed to mean something. And I'm like, you know what? I could list off for you right now 75 Fortune 500 companies, and you don't know their names or what they do. And it's kind of funny in that regard. But when we were at that level and we're trying to scale and we're trying to build it, I said, you just have to think times 1,000 on every single thing that you do and find the answer. So he gets this developer who is no good at all, and he's not getting anything done. And it's like a year into this process to build this back office, but I fully delegated to him so that he could live and die with this experience. And this is exactly like you said about your leaky bucket last week, right? I finally said, this is ridiculous. We need to get rid of this guy. He cannot get the job done. And he argued the reason he couldn't get it done is because it's not technologically available to do what we're asking. I said, that's absolutely not true. We need a smarter guy in the role who's more competent, more responsibility. We got him. And probably within 4 weeks, he got done with the other thing the guy was going to get done in a year and just kept making it better and better and better. And he's been with us now for 13 years.
Do you think it took a year for you to get focused on that? Do you think it was too long to get focused on it? Or
we had the good fortune of being able to manage what we were managing anyway. Mm-hmm. So when I wanted this guy in place, I wanted him in place because I knew 3 years from now we couldn't keep up. Yeah. And so we had time to get there. It would have been nice if it was done earlier and more convenient, but we didn't have to slow any part of our process down because it took that long. However, we would have if I would have interceded at that moment and said, no, we need to get this guy in here. And by the way, to the credit of my partner, very important thing, he found the guy. So when I said we have to find a guy, he found him, and he found the right guy. He wouldn't have done it if I went to press him to do it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the differences.
Yeah. And so how did you, the sales part, let's talk really briefly about that. Like how do sales is so hard for so many founders. They're not good at it. They don't like it. Same way you said, you don't like the sales part, but yet you built an insanely good sales organization.
Mm-hmm.
What's the secret?
Well, because I respect sales and I understand it. And so, okay, this brings me back to optimized personality. One of the things that we do, and this is one of the reasons we do it because it's so important. So I do not like sales, but I am competent, confident, and capable when I'm in a sales role. So that's what you do to optimize a personality. You don't take a person who is like totally introverted and then make them extroverted. Because by default, if 50% of their personality is just the God-given, they're introverted, you can't change that. Like you can't make them 6'5", right? But what you can do is you can get them to be competent, capable, and confident in an extroverted setting. So I didn't know that's what I was doing when I was a young, foolish guy in my 20s. But as I learned about these things and I studied psychology and I studied philosophy and all these different types of things, I was like, oh my gosh, that's personality optimization. And it served me so well to optimize my ability to be in a sales setting. So I thought to myself, okay, I gained the respect of the people. I can speak their language. I can write their programs. I know what it's like to be in front of a customer. That was incredibly useful. And it was all based on something I didn't like. Okay. There's a huge difference between not liking and respecting it. I respect doctors, but I could never be one. I mean, a patient would walk in, I'd go, oh my gosh, cover that up. You're going to die. Okay. But I'm so grateful we have doctors and I have great respect for doctors. And so salespeople actually, even I think to a certain degree, found that even more intriguing about me leading them is they were like, this guy has tremendous respect for what I do. And he himself wouldn't want to do it. There's something about that. Not wanting to do it because you don't respect it, like Bill Gates hated salespeople, apparently. That's an unusual thing. Like, how do you say, and I shouldn't have said that because I should double check that fact. Okay. But it's kind of folklore out there that he was not really
he's so technical. He just preferred the technical solution, I think.
Yeah, right.
The human side was almost like, this is too messy and I can't track it properly. And
yeah, exactly. And so I think that was a part of it. So yeah, so I started building these systems and, I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sales training programs for either my own companies or other companies, developed them and trained the salespeople. And collectively, those companies have done, probably now billions in sales from that process. And to the degree that some people think, oh, you're a sales leader, sales trainer, sales manager. And I was like, no, I'm actually the CEO of the company. I mean, this isn't even my part-time job. I'm just doing this now until I get somebody in this role. And then I hired a trainer to do that and recruiters to do all this stuff. But that's how I set it up and spent that time. But they didn't realize that I was equally in the finance department and equally in the marketing department and equally in the recruiting department and everything else.
But does that contrast? I mean, going back to almost where we started, does that contrast too much with you going too deep in the weeds in some areas? Like, it sounds like, okay, you're deep in the weeds, you're building the sales training for sales. Like, it means you have to understand the sales piece, you have to understand the different steps, the objections, all these other pieces. You built that. And then were you doing that for every department? Like, how did that actually work without, how did that work without being a hypocrite on these things?
Yeah, no, I would call it a paradox as opposed to a contradiction. When I was involved in the other departments, I was only involved in the other departments, like I said, with TTP in the AM. Tell me about, how's everything look? And then look at reports with them, make sure that they're on fire, and then give them the resources that they want. In this particular role, and it was both recruiting and sales training, okay, all those, like recruiting, sales development, and sales training, we didn't have anyone. And when you lead independent contractors, leading independent contractors is the highest form of leadership skill. Now, there's more heroic leadership, okay, but I'll give you a couple of examples. Leading employees is a little bit like leading soldiers during boot camp. It does not require an enormous amount of skill.
Because they have to be there, they have to listen to you.
They have to be there, and the penalties and consequences for not doing things is so immediate and so obvious that you don't even need to put the threat out, okay? You lead independent contractors, and it's more like leading your soldiers in battle. Okay. Where like they want to run. Okay. And there's like, sure, you can tell me you're going to court martial me, but that guy's going to shoot me in the head. So like, you know what? I'll take the court martial. To have them stay there, that's very highly skilled leadership. To lead teams at professional levels is also a very, very high skilled level thing. Even though they're being paid a lot, you need to get them coordinated at such a high functioning level together. Well, independent contractors are that way because for the most part, there is no stick. It's all carrot. It's all incentive. There's no or else. And that requires an enormous amount of skill. And that was a skill that I developed over many years. It's very unusual. It's a very unusual skill. There are certain things. It's like why if you're going to be a quarterback for a professional football team, you're not just going to put an ad on ZipRecruiter. Okay. It's hard to find. You can find many independent contractors. You can find many low-level leaders of independent contractors. But once you start to get into that upper-low, and an upper-low level of leading independent contractors is a more skilled position than being a vice president of employees. And the higher you go, the more difficult it is because you're sending shockwaves of culture. So it just took me a long time before I found the replacements. And that amount of time that it took to find them was probably 50% of the time that it took me to find my replacement as CEO. I mean, CEO is the highest level of that sort of skill for leadership. There are many people that have higher levels of skill than a CEO, but when it comes to leadership, that is the archetype level of leadership CEO is. I mean, that's why you have that title. And so it just took longer to get them. And that was the only reason. Because if I could have found them in one day, I'd have put them all in place.
And so you just put this sales training in place, you put the pieces in place because you went somewhat deep on that, put it in place, and then of course look for that independent contractor leader. And it's off.
And then eventually 50 of them.
Yeah. And within years, like you were just surfing a perfect wave. Like you found the right industry at the right time and boom, it hit.
Let me answer that question by telling you what it was. In 2007, we went into print magazines.
Which is, most people would say that was insane.
Oh, is it literally the opposite of riding a wave? Like everybody was like, what are you going to do next? Open a VCR company? Are you kidding me? Everybody was leaving print like it was a burning building. Yep. Now we found and developed a niche inside it, but we didn't ride any wave. We made our own. We were an industry disruptor is what we were.
Yeah. And that's just lack of fear for you. Like once again, like that's what great entrepreneurs do is they find something that is not obvious. Obviously, that's how you build a great business.
And you know what? I would say this is to kind of support your point in a little way. I would say instead of riding a wave, we walked into a vacuum. So people were leaving print like it was a burning building, but they were leaving it under the wrong pretenses. And we kind of recognized, wait a second, I know that everybody's leaving print because of digital, but like it makes no sense to leave it here. So why don't we go back in here and solve the problem that the vacancy has now left available? And that was there.
And then you could acquire magazines, things like that on the cheap because everyone's trying to get out.
No, we didn't acquire any. We built all of our own from the beginning. All of them are our own publications that we built. We didn't. None of that growth was through acquisition.
None. Wow.
None. Zero. Yeah.
Good for you. Okay. Also question that, but I know we are already over time. So I want to ask kind of maybe to last question I'll try to ask everybody is if there's a single piece of advice that you could give to every entrepreneur who wants to achieve excellence, what would that single piece of advice to keep in your mind? What would that piece of advice be?
Know how many people are smarter than you. For me, that is absolutely without question. I think the thing that has helped me. So as an entrepreneur, especially when you start to get a groove, you get a lot of recognition. You might, depending on the size of the company, win awards and be invited here or there and asked to speak. And everybody wants to ask your opinion. And I'm telling you, Adam, like the number of people who are smarter than me and who have done more incredible things, who you can find answers from or have a deeper understanding of certain aspects of whatever it might be. The answers are so far out there. There's just so many of them. There's no shortage of people who can help. There's no shortage of answers out there. The number of people who are smarter than you is amazing. And as soon as you start believing the headlines like you're the man, You have all the answers. You're like dead in the water. You're only going to be as good as you are that day. You're never going to be as great as other people have gone before you. And I think that is probably the biggest thing. I would also say, Stephen Covey classically said that you want to begin with the end of the mind. I always ask people, what is that end? The actual end. It's not retiring at 65 and then being able to play pickleball and go on an annual cruise. I mean, so friggin' what? Like, what are you ultimately working for? And I know some people might say, well, don't make it religious. And you're not doing this, Adam. I am as the guest. So I don't know how you do with your show anyway. But just for me, speaking on my behalf, not you with any endorsement of this or not, man, like, okay, well, why am I here? Like, this is going to be done in no time. I'm 56 already. I've got some time left here, but every year that goes by, I'm on borrowed time. What am I actually working toward? And if I'm working towards something that's bigger and more eternal, it's going to absolutely affect the way I make decisions here right now. And frankly speaking, I've never met anyone who doesn't have a level of peace and satisfaction in life and reduced anxiety without giving that consideration. And so, maybe I'd be a little careful with some people I talk about that, but the older I get, the more I'm like, you know what? All the other stuff isn't quite as important.
So what is Dave Durand working towards?
Heaven. If you're asking me directly and personally, the answer is I want to hear Jesus say, well done, good and faithful servant. And those words would be better than selling a company for $1 billion, infinitively better.
I love that. So essentially giving back, helping the world, making it a better place for entrepreneurs, but also for everybody.
Yeah, right. We're not just doing it for ourselves. Amen.
Dave, thank you for all of that. You are giving back every day by spending this time with me, my audience. How can everyone find you if they want to learn more, figure out how they can get to that end point in live the right ways, build a great company that helps them achieve their vision and mission in life?
You're kind to ask. My podcast is Durand on Demand, which is easy to find, but they can find me on LinkedIn, just Dave Durand, or they could email me at admin@leading, which is always weird, Adam. If I'd have thought through this further, you'd like doubt my marketing here. Leading Giants has 2 G's in it, which is always weird. So I can't just say at like Dave, whatever. I have to say Dave at Leading Giants. That's leading, like leader, giants.com. I would save 2 hours in a week if I didn't have to say that, but you're admin at leadinggiants.com.
All right, so that's how to get in touch. Dave, once again, thank you for your time. It means a ton because, as you said, time is short, it's precious, and you can never get it back. So thank you for spending some of it with me.
Thanks, Adam. It's been a real privilege. Thank you.